Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to have a look at how to paint MMM weapons. So what is MMM? It stands for non-metallic metal. It's a style of painting where we paint metallic surfaces using paints that do not contain any metallic pigment or flake. We do this by maximizing value contrast by placing highlights and shadows very close together. This helps to simulate reflections and bounce lights that would naturally occur within the environment. All the paints you'll need will be listed below in the description, along with the PDF guide, so let's get into it. Here are the paints that you'll need today. I'll add a list in the description, along with any conversions to other brands. We're going to recreate this effect on the other side of the blade. We'll be reversing where the lights and the shadows are placed in order to create as much value contrast as possible. So on the top face, the tip of the blade will be bright and towards the hilt will be dark, and it will be reversed on the bottom face of the blade. Starting with Rainy Grey, which has a slightly warmer tone, we begin to create our value map or light map to understand where our reflections and shadows will be. We want our light catching towards the tip of the sword and towards the hilt on the underside to imply there's some reflected light or some bounce light in the scene. I'll be explaining bounce light in more detail in a future video, so hit that subscribe button to get notified. I decided to add the bounce light here because it's beside the shadow on the top face of the blade. This creates more value contrast and adds more pop to our non-metallic. Follow this up with a second coat to get a smooth finish and to create more saturation. Taking some Miskatonic grey, we paint over the original light map, trying to leave some of the rainy grey showing. Don't worry if this is a bit rough, we're still sketching out a lot of the information at the minute. Again, just follow this up with a second coat, hitting a few of the select areas to emphasize the light. Some of the transitions are a bit stark, so I'm going to come back in and try to fix them with a bit of Rainy Grey. I fixed this with a quick thick glaze of Rainy Grey, and I'm a lot happier with how this is looking. Don't be afraid to go back and make adjustments. Non-metallic tends to be more back and forth than step by step. Hykey Yellow might seem like an unusual highlight colour, but by adding this to the Miskatonic grey, it gives the impression that my marine is outside and in daylight. Again, we try to cover less of our previous highlight, so we have a smooth transition between the colours. Again, I wasn't totally satisfied with how this part of the blade looked. I think the highlight is too short and needs to be extended to present more of the blade colour and to soften the transition. I did this by applying a couple of glazes of Miskatonic grey, pulling the colour up towards the highlights. Now let's push the shadows a bit. I'm using Mars Black that I've thinned down to a glaze consistency, dragging it towards the hilt on the top edge and towards the tip on the bottom edge. I prefer to use Mars Black because I wanted a pure black without any colour that might tint the blade, but feel free to use whichever black you have at hand. Using pure Hykey Yellow, I apply it where I want the brightest areas to be. I use a couple of different techniques here, from layering, glazing and stippling to build up the colour. If you're unfamiliar with any of the terms just mentioned, please check out my Techniques in 10 series. Hopefully you can see the yellow tones start to show through, creating a bit more narrative and atmosphere within our miniature. For our final highlight on the face of the blade, I mixed a small amount of purity white into the Hykey yellow. I rarely use pure white on surfaces and save that for the edges and the brightest points. Use this mix sparingly and really focus on a few spots that sit near or beside the areas we painted black in the previous step. Now it's time to pick out the brightest points of our blade, with a few dots along the edge and towards the tip of the blade. You can also use this to indicate scratches, nicks or battle damage if you want to experiment with a different finish. I drop a few highlights on the power rods just to help them stand out, and that's how I paint a non-metallic power sword. Now let's have a look at the gun. Again, I'm going to start by creating a bit of a light map, using my hobby lamp to create the reference. You can almost see that the edges are catching the light, and I'm painting over those. I'm just taking my time, working slowly and checking my reference anytime that I need to. So the back of the gun isn't really being hit by the primary light source. This side is more affected by bounce light, so light that's hit off the ground or another surface and bounced back to hit this section of the gun. So I'll be using those bounce lights to create the highlights on the rear of the weapon, continuing to think about how I'm placing the light and the shadow to maximize that contrast and to create that shine effect. Coming in with our Miskatonic grey, we paint over the light map, trying to leave some of the rainy grey showing, following the same process that we did with the sword. Now you can see this first highlight already starts to build that non-metallic feel. Now you can see that I'm taking my time, I'm stopping to observe where the light's hitting, and continuing to build up those highlights. As I mentioned, the rear of the gun is only being affected by bounce light and not by the primary light. For this reason, I'll not be taking any of these highlights past Miskatonic grey. Same with the sword, we come back in and we push those shadows, creating more contrast. As we're working with a smaller area, the transitions need to be faster and more dramatic to give that non-metallic feel. I'm just making a quick correction here with some rainy grey to smooth out the transition. As with the sword, there is a lot of back and forth when painting non-metallic, so don't worry about being perfect from the start. Enjoy the process. I'm just repeating what we did on the front, on the back of the gun, pushing the shadows a bit further and smoothing out any transitions with the rainy grey. Again, adding the Hykey yellow to the Miskatonic grey to give that hint of natural light. I'm refining the highlights and pushing the values. You can see I keep assessing and changing until I'm happy with the placement. Make sure to pick out the inside of the barrel, along the edges and some of the vents to further boost that shift in value and pick out a few more details. You can continue to build this up and adjust the lighting as you see fit, but hopefully you can see how quickly you can build up these effects in only a few colours. I'll just tidy up one or two more spots and then come back with the final result. Hopefully you found that useful and you're now ready to tackle your own non-metallic metal weapons. If you have any comments, questions or suggestions for future videos, please drop them below in the comments, and I stream a couple of days a week on Twitch if you'd like to come by and hang out. All links can be found below in the description, along with a link to our Discord where you can come by, share your models and get involved with the community. So hope to see you there. Hopefully you found this useful. Don't forget to like and subscribe.